Amazing. Just as we go through this, do feel free to add any questions into the chat or into the Q&A. That would be absolutely awesome. And obviously, we're doing all of this remotely through Zoom. And if there are any connection issues or you struggle to hear myself or Hulda, also just do please virtually shout, I guess, through the Q&A, and we'll do everything we can to sort of rectify that. Mostly it'll be lifting the laptop up and holding it close to our faces, I'd imagine. All right, amazing. So, let's get started. So, would really like to just a massive thank you to begin with for all of you for joining us for our webinar on what does all this reporting mean and how you can get the most out of reporting and improve your campaigns. We'll also go a bit into sort of some of the ad tech side of things, particularly around sort of attribution and third-party cookies as well. But first of all, just a bit of an introduction to myself and Hulda. So I'm Paul Finicharo-Terrell, and I'm the sales director here at the Student Room. I've been in the Student Room since May 2014, and I've kind of just gone through almost every role possible here. The last of which was heading up our programmatic side of the business. So I was kind of like deep in the data that we have at TSR, our reporting, and particularly the tech side of what we do to make essentially ads work both on and off the Student Room. Prior to being here at TSR, I worked at Penna, whereas a client partner or account director on their higher education accounts, and at Educate before that. So about 10 years in total working alongside HEIs. And basically as part of my role, I oversee the sales and B2B marketing teams, working alongside our partners in education, government and recruitment, helping them to engage with our awesome audience. Hulda.
Oh, thank you. I was in two minds whether I should pronounce my surname as well. We got very good surnames. But I'm Hulda. I'm the client services manager here. So I've been here since September 2017. And quite similar to Paul, have done a lot of different roles here. I work a lot on client campaigns, and I do a lot of creative analysis as well, which you might have attended the last webinar where I went through clearing stuff. And I also oversee the team that delivers all of the campaigns here. So from setup all the way through to reporting.
Awesome. I think they kind of roll both of us out when they just want to make it really hard or like expecting spelling mistakes. We should just be Paul and Hulda Jones next time. So I guess before we sort of move on to sort of like a relatively heavy sort of topic around sort of reporting and attribution, I thought just to kind of just take a bit of time to sort of just say what we're most looking forward to this week. And it's it's an awesome sunny day in Brighton, and I'm looking forward to two things in particular. One is a haircut, because this has got wildly out of control, and two is a overpriced yet probably lukewarm pint in our local right next to the office. So they're two things that I'm super psyched for this week. What about yourself, Hulda?
Pub, 100%, definitely. Also charity shops. A lot about it. It's like my favorite thing to do on the weekends. Nice. Just browse charity shops. So I'm very excited to do that.
Amazing. And if any of you would like to sort of share some of the things that you're most looking forward to this week, then it'll also actually be quite lovely to see in the chat. I went to my very first shop in 3 months yesterday, and I didn't know how to react. I realized that sort of like supermarkets are super transactional, and once I had to sort of be in a shop and sort of like properly talk to someone, it's a plant shop, and I know nothing about plants. I had a minor sort of like moment of panic. I was like, what do I do here? We'll see. Cool. So that side. So what are we going to go through today, other than sort of like my panic attacks in flower shops? We'll give.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just before you go, I totally agree with Molly. She said eating a meal that wasn't cooked by me, and I 100% agree with that.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, Molly put in the chat. I don't know if you can see it in the chat. She said eating a meal that wasn't cooked by me.
Oh yes, definitely. Cool. So what are we going to sort of cover today? So we're going to give an overview of TSR. We're going to talk about why reporting is important. That'll be with Hulda. Then I'm going to talk about sort of attribution modeling, bit of the good, bad, the ugly. Something called incrementality, which is relatively new, but I personally think it's pretty cool. We'll look into third-party cookies and the sort of the possibilities that kind of kicks out. Then kick back to Hulda for advancing in reporting at the student room, a bit of a recap, and then leave some time for questions, comments, and hopefully some feedback from you all as well. Cool. So, Hulda, over to you.
Lovely, thank you. So I just want to kick off with a bit of an overview of TSR. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so just going over the kind of traffic that we see on TSR. So really solid stats here. Over 94 million users on site, over 268 million page views, and a really solid session duration as well. And then if we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to briefly go over why we're essentially going over reporting today. So if you go to the next slide. Cool. So as we know, the digital landscape is continuing to evolve and change all the time. And tracking and targeting is also changing constantly. So just thought it'd be important to go over what all of that means right now, and also what that's going to mean in the future, especially with the cookies next year, and then what we can report upon, and then what we can support upon as well. So I'm going to move straight into the reporting metrics. Just the next one, please. So I was actually watching this webinar, the Atlassian Summit, and John Custy said, you can find a metric to prove whatever one point you want to prove, which I thought was, quite apt, because you can definitely, when you dig into reporting, you can definitely find a metric to explain or to prove whatever the point is you want to prove. So if we move to the next one, please. So why metrics? So I've kind of listed out the main ones that you'd use like metrics for. So you want to show the performance of activity. You want to identify areas of improvement. You obviously want to show what's working. You want to be able to use that to inform and forecast for the future. And then you also want to understand the value. And when I say understand the value, I mean the ROI of the activity that you've run. So I actually have a little poll. If we could get that up, Carly. Lovely. So I wanted to find out from you guys, what is the main use of reporting for you from day to day? So you can select as many as you'd like. And I just think it'd be interesting to see across the board. It's working.
This is the first time we've tested this in the wild. So
it is working. I think I can just run it for a few more seconds and then I'll end the poll, and I think you guys will see the results.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, lovely.
Oh, wow.
Cool. Yeah. So generally monitoring performance and then show what's working, where are the top ones, with improvement in second, and forecasting for the future in last. Yeah, interesting, 77%. Yeah, cool. So majority is just generally monitoring performance and showing what's working, which is cool. Thank you, Carly. Cool. If we could go to the next slide, please.
Yep.
So metrics are a way to show performance, obviously, but the value of the performance and whether it's perceived as good, bad, or neutral is determined by individual factors that will change for everyone, and will be individual to each of you. So how you're measuring your data. So are you measuring it solely based on conversions, for example, or are you measuring it solely based on CTR, etc.? Why are you measuring it? So you obviously want positive performance, but could be, you want to test how a landing site is working or something like that. And then how you're tracking against your goals. So how that specific activity feeds into your larger strategic goals. Yeah, so those are kind of the main, I suppose, identifiers that should be used when thinking about the performance. So if we go to the next slide, please. Cool. So when you're demonstrating the performance, you want to make sure that you're tracking all of the activity. And I think especially next year with cookies and stuff, making sure that all of your links are tracked in everything that you do, so that you're able to see what happens after somebody has clicked onto your link. You want to understand the journey as well. So for example, if you have a really high like click-through rate and a really high bounce rate, for example, kind of digging into that and figuring out why that is. So if you have a high click-through rate, you could say like, oh, the creative is working and the audience is engaging with it, but something is happening when they land on our page, or vice versa. If you have really low CTR and a really low bounce rate, it would probably indicate that it's the creative that isn't working for this campaign versus the landing page, because they're obviously engaged once they land onto your page. And then any reports that you're supplied should definitely be used in conjunction with reports internally. So let's say you get a report from us, you also want to use that with your Google Analytics or your GTM or whatever you use in-house. And then the next one, please. So I want to quickly touch on this as well. So bad performance doesn't necessarily equal bad metrics. So when you have activity that doesn't measure up to your expectations, I think it's really, really important to figure out why that is, instead of generalizing the whole campaign as having done bad. And I think the top three main ones that are good to look at are, was it the targeting? So if you dig deeper into a campaign, for example, and you figure out, oh, actually, like a certain geolocation did the worst out of all, which dragged the performance of the overall campaign down, but everything else did really well, that would kind of indicate that it wasn't the campaign, but it was a specific targeting. The same with the creative. What was your messaging, your call to action, your, like use of colors, or where that creative sat? So I don't know, if it was like on TSR, which is like a blue site, if the creative was also the same color of blue, would it just blend in? Like, would that be the reason? And kind of figuring that out. Yeah, once you've identified that, metrics should show that some parts of the campaign performed well. So yeah, and then give you a focus for improvements for the future. So I have a second poll where I kind of want, if Carly, you could get it up for me. Lovely. So I kind of wanted to see what the protocol is for you when you're looking at bad performance. So you can choose as many as you'd like. So the C is all relevant activity. So you just stop the campaign completely. You identify areas that are working well, and then you start focusing on that. Or you identify areas that are not working well and focus your efforts on that. Or do you repeat the activity to gain more insight? So as in, you'd want more data on why it did how it did. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. So yeah, and all of the responses are anonymous as well. So just make sure. Okay, yeah, identify areas that are working well and focusing efforts on that. And yeah, which I think are the best ways to definitely do it. And I think especially the areas that are not working well, to be able to identify those as well is really, really important. So I'm going to pass over to Paul now. I was actually going to go over attribution, which feeds in nicely into monitoring the performance and understanding the stats.
Thanks, Hulda. Just one thing from that poll, which I found quite interesting, is the sort of very few people, I think sort of 24% maybe, would look to repeat activity to sort of try to gain more insights. And it is a really tough thing to do because budgets are tight, and putting more budget towards something that sort of looks like it's poor performing can be a tough decision to make. But there probably are occasions where that is a worthwhile thing to do for many of the reasons that I think that Hulda outlined earlier. Often if something underperforms, be it anywhere, so TSR or anywhere else, there are sort of so many reasons that can kind of sit behind that. And yeah, taking the chance to sort of dig deeper into that, particularly around targeting creative landing pages. Landing pages is such an interesting one. There's a stat from, I think, Google, which is that for every second of page load speed, it adds about 30% of bounce rates. So you can sort of take some of those things into mind and just think, oh, actually, that might be why. But yeah, so attribution modeling. So firstly, just a bit on what is attribution modeling. I'm going to read this out. So yeah, marketing attribution is the way in which you, marketeers, assess the value or ROI of the channels that connect them to potential customers. In other words, it's the means by which the customer comes to know and buy your product or service. So in theory, that sounds super simple. And it's super simple if you think in context about the final sale. But does a customer ever really go straight to a website and make a purchase? Like, very infrequently. And is that the case in a very considered purchase, like attending a university, going to an open day, essentially sort of a £27,000 purchase potentially? So really, multiple channels and messages are responsible for that final decision, be it sort of search, social, media like TSR, UCAS, What Uni, and obviously sort of a lot of the active remarketing you guys will be doing. So yeah, lots of channels are involved within that. In an ideal world, you'd be able to track that entire customer journey from start to finish. You get personal anecdotes from each of those individual customers on exactly sort of like what media sort of or what channels kind of drove that decision making. But it's not realistic, and it definitely isn't scalable. So with all of these touch points to consider, operational marketing roles are becoming just more and more complex. Thankfully, there are a couple of different attribution models out there, and they're being introduced and involved sort of over time to help to take into account all of those channels that are involved in that decision-making process. But yeah, you know, it's called the good, bad, the ugly for a reason, which is that not all these attribution models are equal or fit for different purposes. So first one to touch on is single source attribution. So yeah, what is single source attribution? There are two main types. So the first one, first touch attribution, and name as it says, all the success of the campaign, be it lots of individual media that was seen, everything is assigned, so that conversion is assigned to the first channel that was engaged with. So if you have a user that might have saw your ad on Amazon, then the Steam Room, then UCAS, then did a search, and then went and sort of completed your open day registration form, that would assign that conversion to the first touch point, which is in that scenario, Amazon. Now, the second one that's often used in single source attribution is last touch attribution, and name that because it's the last touch point before the final sale. So it gives all the credit to that last touch point. So let's inverse that example and think, as a user, you go onto the Steam Room to sort of speak to people within forums about the different institutions that you're looking to study. You think, oh yeah, this is the place for me. You go into UCAS, you try to find out a little bit more, you see an ad for for that institution. You're like, okay, do you know what? I think that's really great. But first of all, what I'm going to do is I am going to go and buy this book on Amazon. You go to Amazon, you see the ad for that HEI again, and then you go and sign up for an open day. Despite all of the channels that are involved in that decision-making process, the conversion will go to Amazon. And that's how last touch attribution would work. So bearing in mind that there are no shortage of channels for people to engage with, this model is starting to see as a bit archaic and inaccurate. Despite that, it is also the channel, the model that is most widely used. So if this is something that you are using, you are absolutely not alone. I'd probably say you're in the 95% majority. It is an incredibly popular model, but for a very considered decision-making process, it probably is a bit archaic and quite inaccurate. And it's principally, I think, required now for more sort of like almost like fast-moving goods and quick sort of point of sale conversion. So the next core model is multi-source attribution or multi-touch, of which there are a bundle of different ways of doing it and with varying levels of complexity. I think the simplest one to go down, if this is something you're not doing but want to trial, is the linear model, which basically just takes all of the sort of the touch points that a user has experienced throughout the journey and assigns the success sort of equally amongst all of those touch points. But yeah, as I said, there are lots of different approaches, which you can see sort of up on the slides there, and they do get more and more complex depending on how much you want to sort of get into like marketing mix modeling and econometrics and make it kind of hard, or you can start quite simple and go linear. But yeah, in the multi-touch model, each contributing channel is given credit for contributing to the final conversion. Since multi-touch accounts for the entirety of customers' journey, attribution is given to multiple touch points, which could include everything from ads to social posts, webinars, e-newsletters, everything that someone could experience along the way. It's a much more impartial method, but it's still not exact, and it is definitely more complex to implement. But it does give you a lot more clear idea on what channels are actually influencing the decision. So there are pros and cons to both approaches. But yeah, so that point around influencing a decision leads nicely onto something called incrementality, which is really quite new in the reporting sector. It's for us, we've been talking about it for like 2 years maybe, which doesn't make it sound that new, but it kind of is. But yeah, what is incrementality? So first of all, let's go back to basics, I guess, to a degree. And as we all know, the goal of advertising, it isn't results in an Excel document. It's not just about seeing a sort of a bunch of sort of conversion metrics in a report, although Hulda, you will show some very, very dashing reports later. But the purpose of advertising, it's not in that Excel doc, it's to do a couple of things, and it's to shift consumer attitudes mainly. It's to shift sentiment, it's to build brand, and it's to generate demand. And with incrementality, and we do that through our friends at a company called Avocet, which is an independent ad tech company. It gives you much more insight into what, and this is particularly display media, what your display media is actually fulfilling against this basic goal of advertising. And what it allows you to do is basically see an uplift in behavioral change. And crucially, and I think this is really important now in quite budget sensitive times, to understand what of your sort of display kind of activation strategies is driving that change and driving the kind of real behavioral performance, so you can make some more intelligent budget decisions. So I'm going to take you through this example, and it's just hopefully a super simple example. I'm sure you, like everyone here, is actively involved in remarketing. You're actively involved in buying programmatically through the ad exchange, and hopefully involved with high quality contextual media like the student room, but also UCAS, What Uni, The Guardian, anyone that you'd sort of like consider in that sort of high quality contextual space. I think most of you would be sort of involved in sort of buying across those three type of approaches. And if you are, you're probably very used to seeing results that look like this, where retargeting will always have the lowest cost per acquisition. And that is probably followed by programmatic ad exchange activity and those buys. And then finally, the likes of the Steam Room, UCAS, etc., will probably have the highest cost per acquisitions. And it can be a bit of a sort of like, why is that the case? Because we know that they are high quality contextual media. And why does it look like the performance isn't as good as this other activity? So this is where incrementality is super important for starting to see a slightly different view. So yeah, here you go. So incrementality for me is one of the only ways to really know if your activity is really working. In this, what we're seeing is that of the remarketing, 80% of those conversions, they would have happened anyway. So it's actually only driving an uplift, the behavioral change, which is the goal of advertising, of 20% incremental conversions. So when we start to adjust the success here, the true impact of that remarketing is the CPA goes from £2 to £10 because 80% of those were going to happen anyway. And only 20% of it is your real goal of making behavioral change. And then you see this going across sort of like to open prospecting, where 60% is driving, is probably would have happened anyway, and 40% of it is actually sort of incremental change. And then finally, we move on to the high quality media. And this is where your advertising is fulfilling that main goal of advertising. It is changing consumer behavior. And this is where we probably see around 80% of those conversions probably wouldn't have happened without you doing that activity. Now, I appreciate that this can be quite a lot to take in, and it really flips on our heads how we look at conversions. How many of us have seen reports? So a question for so many of us is like, how many times have we seen reports which have said to us, we've got the best conversions ever, this is the best year for conversions ever, but student numbers continue to decline, or open day numbers were down. And this is a case even sort of pre-COVID. And a lot of that, for me, sort of flows into this around sort of where, the lens that we look at sort of at success. So the takeaway here is that, even if you do your remarketing and your programmatic buying yourselves, take a look at some of the suppliers that are out there. So like Avocet, I think sort of Google has an incrementality kind of tool built in as well. They are really great and super simple to use. But yeah, if you sort of like outsource everything to an agency, once again, ask the question about, is this possible? And add it to your campaigns. I think it'll be eye-opening for you. I think you'll almost certainly have a, that's really interesting kind of moment. And then once you kind of know that, you can kind of get on with sort of using your budget in a hopefully a far more effective way. Now, what I would also say is that the window for possibly doing this is getting a little bit smaller and might end in about 9 months because of changes that are coming with Google and third-party cookies. So I'd probably suggest as well, trying to do some of this incrementality testing as much as you can now, and then take those learnings into post-January 2022. So yeah, without further ado, the fly in the ointment, the great big can of worms, and the evergreen in our sewers, third-party cookies. Looking at this now, actually, I'm already finding how dated it is, which is really weird. But yeah, so third-party cookies and what's going to happen. So this image here, this really confusing image, is something called the Lumoscape, and that is all of the sort of like the different kind of tech that's involved in the ad tech ecosystem, from agency side all the way through to publishers. And what it kind of does is it puts a big old ship right in the middle of that, and so potentially has huge ramifications and disruption on everything to sort of how we track, report, target our prospects. So yeah, what do we know? Not a great deal, if we're honest. So we know the third-party cookies will be blocked in Chrome from early 2022. This was made quite explicit as well by the teams at Google. We kind of also know that they're creating something called Privacy Sandbox, and it's going to be a privacy-first future for the web, which, let's be fair, none of us can really argue about. That makes complete sense. Google have also made it quite clear that they're not going to support any kind of hacks and any sort of third-party sort of workaround. There's a quote here, which is today, 3rd of March, we're making explicit that once third-party cookies are phased out, we will not build alternate identifiers to track individuals as they browse across the web, nor will we use them in our products. So that's from David Temkin, Director of Product Management, Ads, Privacy and Trust. So it's pretty clear. There are things that are sort of coming through the pipe, though, that might save the day. And one of those is something called FLoC, which is Federated Learning of Cohorts. And that could be a really good alternative to remarketing, but we need to learn more about it. So yeah, what is FLoC? So what it aims to do is effectively hide individuals in the crowd, and it uses that to sort of preserve individual users' privacy. So, and it uses on-device processing to keep a person's web history private and on the browser. We don't know a whole heap about it, but what it'll be doing is clustering large groups of people with similar interests together. So it kind of might be a lot like what you see with lookalike targeting, but that is what Google are testing as an alternative to remarketing. And yeah, Google thinks it works. So there's a test and there's a blog post from Chetna Bindra, who's the Group Product Manager, User Trust and Privacy at Google. And what they found is user tested FLoCs to reach in-market and affinity Google audiences. So in-market and affinity will probably be your remarketing. Show that advertisers can expect to see at least 95% of the conversions per dollar spent when compared to cookie-based advertising. So I think it'll have about 95% sort of similarity of success. But yeah, it's very much in sort of trial at the moment, and it should be available for more advertisers to test in Google Ads throughout Q2. Cool. So what is the impact for you, for marketeers? Basically, by using privacy preserving techniques, aggregating information, adding noise, and limiting the amount of data that gets sent from the device, there are ways around how some of the things we talked about earlier, in particular, can be minimized. So some of the biggest challenges are around tracking, in particular. The attribution models we talked about earlier, are they actually all going to disappear? One that is almost certain is the view-through conversions will be a thing of the past. Yeah, so what Google are looking at is that they're going to create some APIs. If you're really nerdy and want to get into this, there's a great sort of resource in GitHub around this. But so they're creating APIs to report conversions in a way that protects user privacy. And what this is likely to do is only sort of be able to allow reporting on click-through conversions. So a lot of this sort of stuff that we focus on right now, click and view-through conversions, will be a thing of the past. So yeah, this once again really protects user privacy by creating like a lot of noise within that conversion data as well, to sort of like hide sort of individual data. So yeah, what this kind of means for you is that you're going to have to do quite a bit of work to prioritize which conversions are most important for your reporting needs, because the ability to do lots of different types of conversion tracking is kind of going to go away. And I think this is kind of like really sort of well said by this quote by Mario. So while the news certainly seems to create immense uncertainty, it's clear that when it comes to attribution, the ship has sailed on many of the current granular models that were universally applied across all spend. So yeah, quite a lot of work is going to have to be done over the next 9 months to look into what we do here. But yeah, what can you do then as marketeers? They can sort of like identify and build those relationships with contextually relevant partners. So that's likes of ourselves, once again, UCAS, What Uni, opendays.com, The Guardian, sort of rekindle a lot of those relationships that might sort of have sort of stagnated over time as sort of marketing and spend became far more automated. Those partners are going to be sort of there with you for life, really. Yeah, identify those partners with the highest post-click conversion rates, because that might be, it's looking very likely, the only thing that you can track to measure success. So find those partners and sort of and stick super close to them. Yeah, speak to your media partners and your agency partners and find out what their plans are, because there's a whole heap of learning I think we can do together to sort of like just find out a lot more about this and sort of get ourselves through together and act as sort of a bit more of a coherent ecosystem. And then finally, if you get the chance, yeah, test Flock. And if you do, please let me know how it goes. So quite a lot there, but Carly, could you fire up poll 3, please? Cool. So yeah, 70% of people, not yet, 27% some ideas, but no one has a solid plan in place. I think that'll be reflected across most people, to be honest, outside of just marketeers in HEIs, mainly because there is so little information out there, which makes this like super challenging, and we're kind of, to a degree, all at the behest of Google. One thing I would definitely encourage you guys to do as well is that there have been a lot of changes in Safari tracking, and particularly sort of like recent changes in iOS and how in-app ads are being tracked. So if you kind of want to have a look at sort of like what the future is going to look like for Chrome, what you could probably do a bit of is look at sort of like what's going on in iOS right now and sort of like track like how conversions are being viewed there, because the window's closed massively. And that'll give you sort of a bit of an inkling into what's going on. But yeah, I really hope that sort of this has given you a bit more to think about. There are a couple of questions in the chat, which I'm just going to open up. Cool. Awesome. All right. Hulda, back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, really interesting about the third-party cookies and stuff. But yeah, I think just even starting thinking about it now will benefit you so much later down the line. But yeah, so we're moving on to advances in reporting. I'm going to cover off 4 kind of areas so that we've been working on internally to make the reports better. So if we get the next slide, please. So yeah, we're going to talk about the ADA reports and the kind of makeover that they have had, TSR talks, the UP reports, and then some of the conversion tracking stuff we've been working on over the last like 6-7 months now. I think so, something like that, since September last year. Yeah, cool. So next slide, please. Yeah, so ADA, it's been around for a while now. So for anyone who's unaware, it's our programmatic offering offsite. So using the TSR audience to target, not on TSR, essentially. But it needed a makeover. There was a lot of complicated stats in the reports. It was a little bit difficult to kind of follow what was happening. And there was a lot of stats that weren't kind of broken out. So it was really difficult to kind of figure out or find what you were after, essentially. And then our senior data analyst actually worked in some really cool additional stats as well. So I just have a couple of screenshots I wanted to show you. So do the next one, Paul. Thank you. Cool. So the old report looked like the one on the left there. So yeah, it was really difficult to kind of pick out everything that you needed. So what we did is we broke it out into a really kind of easy to read page that just captures all of the main stats that you're after from the campaign in one kind of central place. So it's easy to access. As well as that, if we do the next one. All of the sections have been broken out. So in the data reports, you get like the targeting, you get a creative section, you get a like impressions by date section, and they're all broken out now kind of by different colors. So it's really easy to see. In addition to that, the layout of the actual metrics has been changed. So it's really, yeah, so it's just easier to kind of follow. In the old one, for example, the total amount of conversions was first, and then it was, I believe, post-click and then post-view. And it's kind of been flipped now. So the total is at the end. So it's easier to read. And then the next one. Yeah, so this is one of the new things that is in the report as well. So it's kind of showing you the activity by the domain of where it's actually served. And it goes in order of conversions. So the highest conversions show at the top. But just gives really great insight about where the audience that you're looking to target is and what they're doing, and where they're actually engaging with your brand as well, which is, yeah, a really cool insight that can be translated across many different campaigns. And then we're moving on to TSR talks, please. Yeah, so when building your brand, it's super important to engage with the audience, and TSR talks is one of these things that allows you to do that on a really, really meaningful level, because you're able to directly engage with the people that you want to engage with, so the students that you want to recruit, essentially. And you can be that authoritative voice on TSR. So in the reports, it supplies really old information, in my opinion. So it gives you the unique page views, which is the same kind of with content, obviously, but then it goes down into the posts and posters. So you might see, for example, could we actually just move to the next page? So I can show it. Oh, could we do the next slide, Paul? Sorry. Yeah, so as you can see, like for this one in particular, there were 17 posters and 26 posts, which would indicate that maybe half of those were really engaged with that thread, and posted multiple times, which is really encouraging to see. In addition to that, you also get all of the road blocking information, and it's broken down into the time where we promoted it and then just overall. So you'll get like the roadblocks, for example, for a year. So you could, in theory, go, cool, we promoted this in April, but then in August, go, could we get the stats since then? So the posts and the posters might not have risen that much, but the page views might have, and your roadblocks could have done really, really well as well. On top of that, there's also some cool geo stuff. If you, next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so it's showing you where in the world the traffic is coming from, which is so interesting. So the one on the left there is by country. I think it's tiny on my thing. Yeah, by country, and then it's broken down by the region on the right hand side. But yeah, giving really good insight into your audience and where people are engaging, where people are in the world when they're engaging with you. So the up reports are next. Thank you. Yeah, so I just quickly wanted to go over this because we've done some work on some key period reports. The main one has just gone out last month, I believe. or end of February for the kind of queue period. So up until the UCAS deadline. So from September up until Jan. And then there's going to be another one that covers kind of the clearing period. So from February up until the end of August. The new data within those reports, as opposed to the monthly ones, you get some audience overlap with other unis, total searches for the uni, the average user versus the average up. So yeah, the data across the board versus your data. And then the same for the page split. In the monthly up reports though, we've been doing the conversion project, which if you move on to the next slide, please. So the initial aim of this project was to prove the value of the app in the kind of first phase of it. So not only for students, but by being able to track what they do when they're not on TSR, but also for our clients by showing them the intent of the TSR audience and the effectiveness of the app. So we've done this by placing a pixel essentially in the roadblocks in the forum and the guide that corresponds with the triggers in your GTM. And we're able to track it that way. So we're not reliant at the moment on people clicking through in any way. So we're able to do it by them just having visited your forum or guide on TSR. So if I could have the next slides, please. Cool. So just a slight bit of a background. The first comms went out in September, like I mentioned earlier. We've tried to cover the conversions in kind of three main areas. So we wanted to do general conversions, which would be like your homepage or about page and then contact page. Then course ones. So if they visit your undergraduate page or your postgraduate page, etc. And then kind of focused or low funnel conversions. So book onto an open day, apply now, etc. The phase, like the second phase, went out in January, and then we rolled out into the monthly up reports in the reports that were generated in March for the February activity. So we're trying to work this into BAU at the moment. We should hopefully be done relatively soon so we can make the most use out of it whilst we still can. So if you'd like to talk about it, or if you'd like to be included in any way, definitely email me or speak to your account manager. And then I just want to show what we've been able to track since. So next slide, please. Cool. So we have about 38.4% of the up clients who have opted in so far. We've tracked over 500,000 conversions since September, since we set this up. But in the last year, overall, we tracked about 777,000 conversions. So we've seen like a massive uplift of about 69% since we started this project, which is fantastic. So I want to show what it looks like in the up report, if you can. Lovely. Yeah, so this is what it will look like in your up reports. So we'll show what the conversion points are that you're trying to track, and then kind of like a graph of how you've been doing overall. But some really encouraging stats here. In particular for this one with applications, really phenomenal in 1 month to see. And that is it for the advances in reporting. So I think we're going to quickly recap and then move on to any questions. Cool. So we just have 3 main points really to recap on. So if you can to the next one. Yeah, always combine your external reports and internal reports to get an overview of how you're performing. And don't view them in silos because they need each other to explain the journey of what is going on. And then the next one. Yeah, aim to understand what parts of the campaign did well and what parts didn't. So you can use that to inform, and you should definitely be using that to try to forecast where you should focus your efforts in the future. So whether that be wanting to focus on an area that didn't maybe do well, or focusing on an area that did really well. And also your aim might be not to get great performance. So let's say a certain geolocation just doesn't do well and you really want to get better exposure there. Do the brand work there and not expecting amazing results in the first instance. Because if you've never, like if people living there have never seen your brand before, the first campaign you run there isn't necessarily going to do well, but that doesn't mean it won't do well in the future. Yeah, so definitely using that information. And then the next one, please. Yeah, start planning your post-cookie strategy now so you're prepared for next year. So yeah, just start having a think about it. And like Paul said, chat to as many people as you can. What are their plans? What are they going to focus on, etc. And then draw from that. I think that's us. I think next one is questions. If anyone has.
Amazing. Thanks, Hulda, and yeah, thanks all. So we have a bit of time for for questions, but yeah, firstly, just a massive thank you for you all for sort of being with us along this sort of like reporting and probably the heavy lifting of discussing third-party cookies. So if you do have any questions for us, please do either put them in the chat or in the Q&A function, and happy to answer them. Obviously, it goes without saying as well that this recording will be sent out to you, and also with the slides. But if you do want to get in touch with myself or Hulda at any time after this, because you kind of go back, reflect, and think, actually, I wish I'd asked that. Yeah, do feel free to get in touch, and we'll always be happy to help. Cool. So, any questions? If not, I can ask one of you, Hulda. What's the bit of the reporting changes that you're kind of, I guess, that you found most eye-opening, that you kind of didn't expect when you saw it?
I would probably say the conversion tracking, because I know we've definitely spoken before about the value of the TSR audience, but then just being able to prove the amount of conversions that we're driving was really, really eye-opening. I mean, of course, it varies from university to university, but overall, being able to prove that was just, honestly, and it's also like my little baby, so I'm very
It's nice when sort of like you instinctively know it, but to see it sort of like validated through numbers is just like, that's nice. Amazing. So if anyone, if there are no more questions, so we'll finish up early, and you can all grab 7 minutes to chill, grab a coffee before you probably all inevitably have to go into another Zoom or Teams meeting. So once again, just like a massive thank you from myself, Hulda, and everyone at the Steam Room for this, and really look forward to seeing you all again IRL soon. All right, cheers all.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye.